Take up the financial services bill, which includes funding for the Treasury Department, the SEC, and money for the IRS. The House live at noon Eastern here on C-SPAN. And now reaction from the White House. We'll hear from Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, reaction to the President's speech last night and day 19 of the government shutdown.
Democrats offered any new ideas last night. So how does the
Well, I disagree with that. I disagree with that respectfully. Well, I certainly disagree with it with respect to the president. I think what was new for the president last night was taking his case directly to the American people. In the span of just a week or so, he has taken that case to the Rose Garden, the Situation Room, the room, now the Oval Office, today up in the Senate, later again in the Situation Room, and tomorrow at the border. I mean, he is all out there because he's all in on securing our southern border. I also think that I agree with you, I didn't hear anything new from the Democrats, and I thought the response was anemic and a little bit partisan. But here's what I didn't hear the Democrats say. Here's what I didn't hear Schumer and Pelosi say yesterday, because they can't. They can't tell you that 0 people have been raped, 0 children have been smuggled, 0 people have been trafficked. They can't tell you that drugs are not pouring over, that we don't have a 73% increase in fentanyl coming over the border, that 300 Americans don't die every week from heroin, according to the CDC's preliminary 2017 numbers. So all the things they couldn't tell you. And I think that's where we should start today. My advice today is that we start with just the drugs, or we start with just the kids, and see if we can identify the problem, agree on the problems together, and then get to the solution. But I think we're closer. I think Tom Perez, the head of the DNC, in an interview last hour on Fox News, seems to have, I think, put a little give in there, saying we're close, we can agree on reasonable measures to help secure the nation. And of course, he's against the steel slap barrier, I suppose, but the president's also for additional technologies and detection methods. He's also for, obviously, he's called for additional personnel on our way to immigration reform overall.
Kellyanne, why does the president keep describing asylum seekers as illegal immigrants?
What are you seeing today that convinces you that the president has changed anyone's mind with this address?
Well, I know there's going to be phony baloney polls, and I'll be looking at how they're constructed, because after all, I did that for decades before I was here, to say nobody's been moved. I think it would be a huge mistake to presume that that members of the American public did not learn new things. I sat in off-the-record briefings yesterday with members of the media who admitted they learned new information yesterday. So I would imagine that the public certainly did. And this is a very complicated topic, but it's an urgent one as well.
Are you seeing any minds change, though? Anything to indicate that?
Across the country, I think he's trying to inform minds and change other minds. In other words, do we have a crisis? The definition of a crisis is a difficult and challenging time that demands a decision, demands action. And so again, for the Democrats to say this was a manufacturing crisis, I found that to be a very crushing, disappointing, and downright insulting word to use against those families who, like the president, I have met and held their hands and hugged them and got to know them on the campaign here while we've been here in the White House. Their stories, ladies and gentlemen, are real. It's very raw. They've lost loved ones, and that is not to say everybody who comes over the border is a gang member, a terrorist, a drug. Nobody is saying that. But it is naive and downright insulting and disrespectful to their grievous losses to pretend that their loved ones weren't killed, weren't trafficked, that we're not losing our kids and even our adults to drugs increasingly in this country. 72,000 died last year, and so much of it is coming through the southern border. Now, one thing I will tell you, because it hasn't been said enough or at all, every Democrat voted for the massive drug legislation that passed a couple of months ago and is now the law. And they've acknowledged that we have a drug problem by doing that. One of the measures in there was called the STOP Act. It's an acronym. It essentially just compels our own postal service to be more rigorous in interdicting packages that come from foreign nations. And so you have to have, much like the third-party carriers need to do, sender-recipient contents. The idea there is to cut off some of the flow that's coming through our own postal service and into our neighborhoods and poisoning our kids and our adults. And so they've all admitted that it's a problem. So if it's a problem for that, we know it's a problem in this regard as well. So we're just asking them to make good and extend on the promises that they've already funded, already acknowledged. My advice today to everybody is let's just start with the kids, or let's just start with the human trial. Let's just start with the drugs and maybe take it piecemeal. So we'll see what happens.
What are other viable options?
I wasn't elected to anything.
What are other viable options if the Democrats don't get on board? We've talked about, essentially the president has tweeted before saying he would close the southern border. He had said that before. We haven't heard much of that since. So aside from a potential national emergency that we've heard in recent time,
but the president wants to negotiate.
Yes.
He even said that last night. Come to the table. Let's negotiate. We're all saying that, and I'm very pleased that they are. Very pleased they're coming back here today. Very pleased the president is going to the Senate at lunchtime. I was up there yesterday with the vice president in the Republican conference and the Secretary of Homeland Security, and obviously the acting director of OMB. And I would just point out to you something the vice president keeps saying, because it's an important point. The Democrats who were negotiating this weekend on behalf of the leaders did ask for certain measures that are on the whole back page of that 2-page letter to Chairman Shelby that came from the OMB, Office of Management Budget. I think it's important to look at that because they're asking for additional money to meet the humanitarian needs. They're asking for additional personnel, electronics, technology, detection measures, and that is in the letter. It's a proposal, basically. So I don't know that we're as far apart as it sometimes seems. But again, I would ask the Democrats too, if you object to more steel slat barrier, then are you willing to tear down the walls that are already there, tear down the barriers that already exist? That would be really tough. I haven't heard a single Democrat say, yes, let's tear down those walls, to coin a phrase from another great president. But it's so, if they agree that that is helping somehow, then why not just extend upon that in addition to all the other measures that are in there? But I think the president took the case to the American people last night to also say, we're continuing negotiating, let's get to the table, let's see where we agree. And by the way, where do we disagree? Do we disagree that some people are being raped and trafficked and the drugs are coming over? I haven't heard anybody say that because they can't say it.
Kellyanne, why does the president continue
to meet with the Republicans today in the Senate? What does the president say to those Republicans who are up for re-election in 2020 specifically? Now more of them, Lisa Murkowski just coming out saying, let's end the shutdown, then discuss border security more broadly.
Well, that was said in the Situation Room too, as you know. In other words, there was nothing new last night from Schumer and Pelosi. They've said that before. Look, if that were true, if that were an honest offer, then border security would have gotten done in 2018.
What do you say to the Republicans who are suggesting?
Well, first of all, to us, it has nothing to do with 2020. This is not about politics. The president's made that very clear. He thinks this is the right thing to do, and it's not even a campaign promise. It's his solemn duty to keep us all safe, and he sees this as one way to do that, border security being national security. He will certainly be addressing those members, the Republican members of the Senate today, Pete, and he'll take their questions as well. So if they want to raise that with him, they will. Obviously, OMB has been talking about, including to the press, the mitigation activities that are already happening. The pain that was caused during the 2013 shutdown was very notable, and here there are mitigation strategies as well. Yesterday, the announcement with food stamps, for example, and also making sure the Coast Guard was funded right away, since that falls under DHS. And so I would ask also that the Democrats stop keeping the government shut down, because all they have to do is fund DHS the way that DHS and the president are asking. And by the way, a lot of this comes from the men and women at the border. That's who tells us what they need. They need more personnel. They need technology. They need steel slats. That's where this came from. I mean, we're not cooking it up inside the White House. These are the people. We're very comfortable and cosseted here. They're putting their lives on the line every single day for all of us, and that's what they say they need.
Kellyanne, why does the president keep describing asylum seekers as illegal immigrants?
Why do you keep on describing them as asylum seekers if they're no? You have to get your semantics right too. If they're asylum seekers, that means that they have presented a claim of fear at the border, and it will be processed. Under Flores, we can't keep the families for more than 20 days, as you know. So it's the courts and the Congress who have failed to act in a way that helps us to manage the increase of unaccompanied children and families coming from the Northern Triangle countries, which is fundamentally different than what has been the case at the border for many, many years, which is single males coming from Mexico. Semicolon. Furthermore, comma, Mexico has offered them asylum and work visas in Mexico while their claims are being processed. We're waiting for some court action on that, but that's a very good offer because that's safe passage and work visas. The new government in Mexico has been terrific, and Secretary Pompeo, Secretary Nielsen negotiated that, so they can do that. But not everybody that presents a claim of fear has a credible claim of fear. They're all being processed. You're calling them asylum seekers. You want to call, but you should use more. Well, respectfully, what you should do. No, that's not true. There's a safe third country. It's called Mexico, and under the law, they could certainly stay there while their claim is being processed. Their claims will be processed. There's no question.
Make them illegal immigrants if they're trying to get asylum here. That's a legal process.
No, you're wrong. And anyway, and I know you don't want to say that. You want to call. You want to just change the semantics around. But the fact is, I don't want you. You make me stand here all the time as a woman, as a mother, as a person whose heart beats and has a conscience. As a woman, as a mother, I don't want these kids raped, trafficked, getting the drugs. I care about the kids on that side of the border. I care about the kids on this side of the border. And I think it's high time that people rise above the partisanship and agree with that very, very basic point. This is a nonpartisan issue. Let's get some bipartisan solutions. Thank you.
The House returns in about just under 20 minutes, noon Eastern. Democratic leaders beginning their efforts to reopen the government. One agency